Revealed, the inspiring story of a poor farmer who rescued a girl sold like cattle. Jake Thompson wiped the sweat from his brow, the crisp autumn air doing little to soothe the heat rising within him. It was farmers' market day in Willow Creek. Families filled the streets, laughter bouncing off the town's aging buildings like music. But what fueled the buzz was more than just chatter, it was the stubborn hope of survival. For Jake, a 35-year-old farmer struggling to keep his family legacy intact against all odds, each season felt heavier than the last. Bills piled up, crops faltered, and every harvest brought uncertainty, casting shadows over his dreams of a better life for Sarah and their 2 children. It was a morning like any other, the smell of fresh pies mingling with the earthy scent of hay. As Jake made his way through the crowd, the sight of vibrant produce in his arms felt like a small victory. But as he turned a corner, the laughter faded into a quiet hush, and his heart sank at the scene that unfolded before him. A young girl, no older than 10, stood trembling on an improvised stage, her small frame stark against the backdrop of laughter and light. She was being auctioned off not for a farm, but for her very life. Despair hung around her like a heavy coat, and every frightened glance she shot into the crowd pierced Jake's soul. His heart raced. Where was the outrage? How could this happen in his beloved community? Shouting above the murmurs, Jake stepped forward, ready to challenge the gathered townsfolk. "What kind of people are we?" he called, his voice booming across the stunned crowd. "This isn't just a girl. This is a child, a life." The words hung in the air thick with indignation, urging others to move, to react. Yet, the crowd remained paralyzed. Even Sarah, his support and the anchor of his life, looked on with a mix of fear and concern. "Jake, stop. You'll only endanger yourself," she whispered fiercely, her protective instincts clashing with his fervor. A fire burned bright in him. He had always believed that compassion transcended fears, boundaries, and age. With every challenge, it felt like a weight was being placed on their family, the financial struggles already tearing at the seams of their lives. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Just when he thought hope flickered faintly, news of an upcoming town hall meeting rippled through Willow Creek, a chance to address rising crime and unite against the darkness creeping into their lives. This was it, Jake thought. His opportunity to rally the community for Lily and others like her. Nervous energy coursed through him. What if they turned a blind eye again? As he took a deep breath, preparing to speak, he thought of Lily's desperate eyes, shining with fear. The meeting could either be a pivotal moment for their community or leave vulnerable souls trapped in despair. He stepped closer to the microphone, heart pounding in his chest, feeling the weight of their gazes. In this moment, amid all the uncertainty, Jake stood on the edge of something monumental, a crossroads between fear and unwavering moral conviction. Would he stand for what was right or be silenced by apathy? Only time would tell, but the fight for justice was just beginning. Jake took a deep breath, steadying himself as he stood before the gathering crowd. The town hall was bursting with townsfolk, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The wooden floor creaked beneath his feet as he shifted his weight, his heart racing. Then he heard it: murmurs, whispers crawling through the room like insects. Why should we care? It's not our problem. With the microphone close, he summoned every ounce of bravery, exposing the rawness of his emotions. Lily is one of us, he implored, his voice cracking against the weight of his passion. She too deserves hope just like our own children. We can't stand by and watch lives be sold like goods. His heart pounded as he spoke, the words leaving his lips like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. Pockets of parents exchanged uneasy looks. Jake could see the flickers of recognition in their eyes. He pressed on, fueled by their hesitation and the desperate sincerity of a father who wouldn't let injustice rob a child of her future. This is a battle for dignity, for humanity. If we remain silent, what message are we sending to our kids? That they can choose comfort over compassion? The room shifted, a ripple of murmurs growing louder as his words sank in. Some nodded slowly, while others took a cautious step closer, drawn to his fervor. Sarah stared, her eyes glistening with pride. She had always believed in him, even when doubts lashed against the edges of his confidence. Jake focused on the faces around him, activating a deeper emotional connection while drawing inspiration from their everyday struggles. Every farmer in this room knows the grind, the long hours, the uncertainty, the hope for tomorrow's harvest. But what about our harvest of kindness? What are we cultivating in our hearts? And then he saw her, Lily, standing quietly in the back, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and fear. That sight ignited something in him, a flame burning brighter than before. If anyone in here holds that same fear Lily carries, we need to rise together. We cannot keep turning our backs. We must protect our children. At that moment, a voice called out from the shadows, breaking through the rising tide of emotion. And how do we do that, Jake? What do you propose? It was Old Man Smith, known for his stern disposition and strong opinions. Silence flooded the room, all eyes shifting to Jake that he contemplated the question, feeling the weight of their expectation. We could start by forming a community watch, he suggested, adrenaline coursing through him. We can protect every child in Willow Creek. Let us start raising awareness, educate ourselves. Let's band together and support organizations that fight against this trade. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, one person clapped, followed by another. The applause built, ringing louder as the connections deepened. A spark had ignited, bending the very air with its newfound energy. Suddenly, from across the room, a young mother stood, tears streaming down her face. I don't have much, she called out, but I'll help. I'll open my home for meetings. Her bravery spurred others into action. One by one, citizens began to rise, voicing support. They shared ideas, offered resources, sharing their hearts and dreams for a safer community. The once cynical assembly had transformed into a unified front, driven by empathy. As excitement swelled, Jake felt the thrill of potential coursing through the room. For the first time in so long, a breath of fresh air filled his lungs, hope mingling with determination. This was a concrete movement toward justice. But as he surveyed the crowd, he knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, and just as the spirits lifted, an unsettling thought clawed at him. What if the dark forces behind Lily's auction didn't remain quiet? Would they retaliate? That question settled heavily over his heart, leaving him breathless. The rally was just the beginning, but what dark shadows would they soon face? The energy in the room was palpable, sharp like the fresh air right before a storm. Jake looked out at the assembly, the faces in front of him morphing from skepticism to something resembling commitment. It was an awakening, but one he knew could be snuffed out just as quickly. We need to keep the momentum going, he thought, his heart racing with fear and excitement. As he stepped down from the small stage, he was greeted by Sarah's warm embrace. I'm so proud of you, she whispered, a mixture of admiration and concern lighting up her eyes. He held her tightly, absorbing her steady presence. It bolstered his resolve. The real battle was just beginning, and he couldn't do it alone. Jake began to circulate through the room, engaging individuals, smiling at the young mother who had volunteered her home. He felt their collective anxiety, but also their urgency. The chatter buzzed like bees, and he could almost taste the hope in the air. Did you hear? The old park behind the church would be a perfect place for meetings, said Hank, one of the local farmers, his face bright with eagerness. Maybe we could also have awareness events, piped up another voice from the back. It was Marissa, a schoolteacher known for her passion. Let us get kids involved. They can help make posters. Nodding, Jake felt the warmth of camaraderie flood through him. Absolutely. This isn't just about protecting Lily, it's about empowering our entire community." But even as the words flowed freely, the seed of concern planted itself deeper in his mind. Fear felt more like a tangible force and undercurrent. What if the people behind Lily's auction were watching? What would happen once the curtain was pulled away from their dark dealings? His brow tightened at the thought. He could imagine shadowy figures lurking, waiting for the slightest mistake. His parents always said that when you confront evil, it rarely takes a back seat. It struck him then, they needed a plan, a way to be prepared. A few steps away, Sam stood with a group of men, chewing over ideas. "If we could gather resources we could fight back," he said, his voice gravelly but determined. Jake approached, eager to hear more. "Let us think more about how we can outsmart them," Jake added, his mind racing. "What if we spread out, keep an eye on suspicious activity? We can do this quietly, without making ourselves targets." As discussions turned from talk to strategy, excitement began to swell once again. Ideas bounced around like fireflies, igniting imaginations and creating plans. The passion was infectious, and it felt almost overwhelming to witness the unity forming around him. Then, just as a laugh broke through the worries, the doors to the hall creaked open, revealing two figures clad in dark attire. Whispers cascaded through the crowd, ice washing over the warmth they had shared. The interruption felt ominous. Their presence was like a weight dropped into the room, unsettling the air. "Who are they?" Jake wondered, heart fluttering. The figures moved forward, their expressions unreadable. Jake's instincts kicked in, but it was too late. The air crackled with energy again, tension spiraled like a charged storm cloud. The hard-won unity of the evening hung in the balance. With a voice as cold as steel, one of the figures called out, "We need to talk about your little campaign. And believe me, it's best you listen." The room held its breath, collective anxiety palpable. And in that moment of frozen fear, Jake realized they were staring down the consequences of their courage. He clenched his fists, determination igniting within. They had taken the first step, but now the battle for Lily and every child at risk was real, and the stakes felt higher than ever. What threats lay ahead, waiting to extinguish the light they had just kindled? Jake's heart pounded like a drum as he stepped forward, an instinctual urge to protect those around him surging within him. The two figures, their dark attire casting a shadow over the bright, hopeful atmosphere, seemed to drain the room of warmth and light. "What do you want?" he managed to say, his voice steadier than he felt. The taller of the two stepped closer, revealing a face that was both stern and calculating. "We represent some interested parties. You need to understand the stakes of what you're doing here," he said, his eyes narrowing. A murmur rippled through the crowd, fear mixed with anger. Jake could see uncertainty gripping the faces of familiar neighbors, their courage waning under the weight of intimidation. "We all want to help Lily," Sarah spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "What is it to you? You don't care about her, do you?" The figure let out a humorless chuckle, shaking his head. "You're right. This is about business, ladies and gentlemen. Your little campaign has drawn attention, unwanted attention. And we can't allow that." A knot twisted in Jake's stomach. He thought of Lily, of her smile, her laughter, the hope he had seen in her eyes when he promised to fight for her future. "You think you can intimidate us into silence?" He shot back, finding strength amidst the dread. "You're wrong. We won't back down." The second figure, shorter and wiry, stepped up to the first's side. "Oh, but you don't understand. This isn't just a threat. It's a warning. People like you don't last long when they poke their noses where they don't belong." Jake scanned the crowd, taking in their wide eyes and tight lips a mixture of fear and determination. He felt a familiar spark flicker back to life. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we don't understand. But we're not going to stop. We're going to fight for what's right, and that includes Lily." "Such determination is admirable," the tall figure replied, his lips curling into a sly smile. "But this is a world where ideals often lead to tragedy. Remember, your actions have consequences, and they can be severe." With that, the two figures exchanged a glance, an unspoken agreement simmering between them. Suddenly, they turned on their heels and strode towards the door, their departure as abrupt as their arrival. The tension clung to the air long after they were gone. Once the door closed behind them, the room erupted in anxious conversation. Jake felt the flood of uncertainty washing over him again, but he refused to let it drown his resolve. "We need to regroup," he said loudly, earning the attention of everyone present. "They think they can scare us into submission, but that's not how this works. We're stronger together, and we need to prove that." Sarah squeezed his hand, her unwavering support grounding him. "Jake's right. We've come too far to let them win. Together, we'll devise a strategy. We'll rally our neighbors, make them understand what's at stake." As the buzz of determination resumed, something unexpected sparked within him, an urgency, a sense of purpose sharper than before. They might not know all the dangers ahead, but they had each other. This was a fight worth pursuing. That he turned to look out at the assembly, people who were once strangers, now united for a cause. They shared not just a mission, but a bond that promised to push them forward. "Let us meet tomorrow," Jake said, voice filled with conviction. "We'll start planning our next steps. We're not giving up on Lily, not now, not ever." A chorus of agreement echoed around him, uplifting him like a wave. Hope flourished in the aftermath of fear, igniting embers into flames. But deep down, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. What other threats lurked just beyond the horizon, waiting to test their resolve? The chilling thought sent a shiver down his spine, fueling his determination as he prepared for the battle ahead. The real fight had only just begun. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows as Jake stepped out onto the porch after the meeting. His heart still raced, but now it was mixed with resolve. The neighborhood buzzed around him, a living, breathing entity, vibrant with purpose, but he felt an isolation too, a strange weight pressing on his chest that he watched as neighbors exchanged worried glances and whispers, their uncertainty palpable. Jake remembered Lily's laughter, the way it lit up even the darkest of days. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. Each moment pushed him closer to knowing he had to fight not just for her, but for everyone feeling powerless that evening. "Hey, Jake," Sarah's voice pulled him from his thoughts. She stood by his side, a determined light in her eyes that helped pierce the dark. "Are you still with me?" "Of course," he replied, trying to draw strength from her unwavering spirit. "We're going to make them see that we can't just be pushed around." Just then, George, a fellow neighbor and a burly figure with calloused hands, approached, his brow furrowed. "Do you really think that meeting was just a warning?" he asked, eyes darting towards the street as if expecting the looming figures to return. Jake nodded, the feeling of danger threading through his veins like cold steel. "I do. But it's more than that. It's a challenge. We need to prepare ourselves." The words hung in the air, heavy and electric. George crossed his arms, chewing on his lip as his gaze shifted to the other neighbors gathering in clusters, their fear palpable. "What if it's not enough, Jake? What if we fail?" The question felt like a slap, though there was no anger in George's voice. It was pure, raw vulnerability. Jake took a step closer, lowering his voice, hoping to comfort. "We can't think like that. If we let fear win, we lose Lily and everything we're fighting for. We need to believe in each other." Sarah rested a hand on George's shoulder, and he visibly relaxed, the tension easing as she nodded. "We can fight back. How about we start organizing, gather supplies, support, anything we can use to make our voices louder?" "Good idea," Jake said, the spark of inspiration igniting a flame in his chest. "We need to show them we're united, that we care. If we get everyone involved, we can channel this energy into something powerful." As people began to mingle with renewed purpose, Jake stepped back to take it all in. The dim light of the late afternoon bathed the crowd in warm hues, illuminating their determined faces. For the first time since the figures had disrupted their meeting, he felt a flicker of hope. Together, they were building something stronger than fear, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows stretched longer, hinting at the growing darkness. A cold breeze stirred, rustling the leaves. Jake's stomach twisted, the feeling that more was looming, a danger he could not yet see. Just then, a scream shattered the air. It cut through the camaraderie like a knife, sending everyone spiraling into chaos, heads snapping toward the source of panic. Jake's heart dropped. Lily. He barely recognized his own voice as he surged towards the sound, weaving through the crowd, dread pooling in his gut. As he neared the edge of the gathering, he saw a figure struggling, desperately trying to evade capture. An icy grip of fear tightened around him. He knew he had to reach her before it was too late. What had just been an evening of promise was spiraling dangerously out of control. Would they be able to save her in time? Jake's feet pounded the ground as he raced towards the scream, every heartbeat drumming louder in his ears. He could barely make out the scene ahead. A group of shadowy figures encircled a familiar form. A rush of anger blended with fear surged through him, fueling his legs as he pushed past stunned neighbors who stood frozen in shock. Lily, he shouted again, his voice hoarse, the name tumbling from him desperate and raw. The sight of her, fighting with everything she had against those who had closed in, ignited something primal within him. He was close now. Jake could see her hair, a tangled halo illuminated by the last light of day. She was struggling, but there was a fierce determination in her eyes. It struck him, how even in this chaos, Lily was still fighting back. Get away from her, he yelled, realizing that he wasn't alone. George had charged forward too, his bulk a boulder against the storm of shadows. But they needed numbers, they needed everyone who dared to stand against this threat. At the edge of the crowd, Sarah called out, her voice ringing clear. We need to help. Everyone, we can't let this happen. As neighbors began to shake off their shock, Jake saw faces hardening with resolve, hands clenching into fists. The power of a united front surged. Without thinking, Jake grabbed a nearby trash can lid, rusted, grimy, but a shield nonetheless. If we fight together, we can drive them off. He shouted, brandishing the lid like a weapon. The figures surrounding Lily turned, finally noticing the gathering crowd. The air was thick with tension as they weighed their options, and in an instant, Jake sensed the shift. They weren't just defenders anymore, they were a force of hope. With a thunderous roar, George surged forward, swinging his arms. Get Lily. We hold them off. The neighbors rallied behind him, coming together like iron sharpening iron. Jake reached Lily just as the figures hesitated, unsure whether to stay or run. She was breathless, her eyes wide with fear, but he could see a flicker of gratitude light up their depths. I thought you wouldn't come, she whispered. That he gripped her shoulders, urgency sparking in him. I'm here. We're going to get you out of this. With a blend of anguish and purpose, he nudged her back toward the group where some of their neighbors had formed a ring, but the shadowy figures, emboldened by their size, moved forward again. One lunged, but before he even got the chance to strike, Sarah was there, grabbing a stick from the ground and swinging it to deflect the attack. She had transformed into a fierce warrior in that moment. He's coming to help. Jake gestured to George, who was throwing garbage bags and anything he could find at the figures, a stalwart guardian. The fight unfolded in a chaotic blur. Jake could feel the adrenaline coursing through him as the dull thud of colliding bodies echoed around him. With each shout and rallying cry, the community shone, neighbors protecting neighbors. But just as hope surged, doubt clawed at his heart. Would it be enough? Whispers of fear emerged in the crowd as they faced overwhelming odds. Jake could sense the shadows growing longer again, and anxiety settled in his stomach. Then, a high-pitched whistle sliced through the clamor, piercing the air. All heads turned as a different kind of darkness approached, a sound so chilling it left everyone momentarily paralyzed. The unmistakable click of heavy boots echoed against the pavement, and a figure shrouded in black appeared at the corner of the street, looming and powerful. Jake's heart sank. It wasn't over yet. Get ready. He shouted to the crowd, his gaze locked on the approaching threat, the determination rising inside him once again. Protecting Lily and everyone else was no longer just a thought, it had become his mission. What would happen next? Would they be able to stand together against this looming danger? Jake felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end as the figure in black drew closer. The crowd shifted nervously, the earlier bravado slipping away like sand through fingers. He tightened his grip on the trash can lid, its sharp edges biting into his palm. This was it. Their moment of truth. Form a line. George bellowed, his voice booming through the shaking crowd. Stick together. We can't let them divide us. As if on cue, the neighbors began to regroup, pairing off and taking stances, arms at the ready. Trash cans, sticks, and a few stones were all they had for protection. Fear was palpable, hanging thick in the air, but so was something else, courage. Jake stepped forward, feeling Lily's presence just behind him. She nodded at him, her eyes sparkling with an unyielding spirit. It was infectious. The doubt in his heart began to fade as the community rallied around them. They weren't just a group of frightened individuals anymore, they were a family, standing together against the encroaching darkness. The figure in black stopped just short of the edge of the crowd, scanning them with a cold, calculated gaze. His face was partially obscured, but the glint of malice in his eyes was unmistakable. This was no casual threat, this was a man who thrived on fear. Stand down, his voice rolled out, deep and commanding. You don't want to see the consequences of defiance. Jake felt a surge of anger. You don't scare us. He shouted, every word ringing with defiance. The crowd echoed his sentiment, rallying around his voice. The figure's lips curled into a smirk as he stepped closer. You have no idea what you're dealing with, boy. These are not just shadows, they are my associates. Your bravery will lead to your downfall. A gasp shot through the crowd as the others exchanged worried glances, uncertainty creeping back in. Jake could see fear rippling through the group, watching as faces fell and shoulders slumped. But he couldn't let it end like this, not now. Not when they had come so far together. Together. He yelled again, infusing his voice with hope, desperation, determination. We can do this. Everyone, remember why we're fighting. We're fighting for each other, for our families, for our home. His words hung in the air, electrifying the group. Jake focused on Lily, whose gaze shone with unwavering trust. She believed in him, and that was enough. Just as one of the shadowy figures stepped forward, tension cracking like a raw wire, a sharp crack echoed through the night. A rock had been flung, hitting the figure square in the chest. In a moment of shocked silence, the aggressors turned to assess the new threat. It was Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman from 2 houses down, holding another rock, her eyes fierce and unyielding. No one hurts my community. She shouted, her voice textured with years of wisdom and defiance. In that moment, something shifted. Empowered by Mrs. Thompson's bravery, others began to join in, hurling rocks, trash can lids, and anything they could find. The hesitant crowd transformed into a whirlwind of action, of defiance, screaming back at their oppressors. Jake surged forward, fueled by the growing energy. It was chaos, but it was beautiful, like fireworks illuminating the night sky. Just when it seemed that the tide was turning, a figure erupted from the shadows behind the looming man in black, moving quickly. The crowd froze, a collective heartbeat pounding in unison. Look out! Jake shouted, but it was too late. The newcomer lunged straight for Lily, the realization hit Jake like a punch to the gut. There was more at stake than just their fight against fear, it was about saving each other. What would Jake do next? Would he be too late to protect the girl who had already fought so bravely? Jake's heart raced as he lunged forward, desperate to reach Lily before the newcomer could lay a hand on her. Time seemed to stretch, every heartbeat echoed in his ears. The chaos of the crowd faded as his focus sharpened on the danger that threatened the girl he cared so deeply about. Just as he reached out, the shadow figure collided with Lily, but she reacted, twisting away just in time. She spun with surprising agility, her own hands shooting up as she shoved the attacker backward. The figure stumbled, caught off guard. Jake felt a surge of pride mix with the adrenaline coursing through him. Lily could hold her own. "Get back!" she cried, her voice fierce, cutting through the stillness that had seized the moment. The crowd, momentarily shocked, began to murmur, emboldened by her spirit. Jake darted to her side, ready to fight. He turned to face the attacker, a young man, eyes wild with fury and something darker. "You think you can fight us?" the assailant sneered, stepping from the shadow of the man in black. "You have no idea what you're up against." The words felt heavy, filled with an unspoken threat. But Jake stood his ground, and so did the rest of the crowd, emboldened. "We're not afraid of you," Jake shouted, his voice steadying as he lifted the trash can lid. The attacker made a move to strike again, but Mrs. Thompson, still clutching her rock, stepped forward. "This is our neighborhood. You won't take it from us." Her stern declaration sparked something in the crowd, as they shouted in agreement. Before the assailant could react, a gust from behind sent more rocks flying, propelled by other neighbors joining the battle. The tide was shifting. Fear was being replaced by anger and determination, a roiling mass of standing up for their own. "Form up!" George yelled again, rallying the people into tighter formation. The line of makeshift weapons faced the encroaching figures with newfound resolve. Together, they pushed forward, the fear transforming into an almost palpable force of unity. But the figure in black remained unmoved. "You think you can win this? We are only just beginning." His voice dripped with scorn, and he waved a hand, signaling the shadows behind him to draw closer. Dark figures shifted, blending into the night, surrounding the crowd as tension crackled like electricity. "Lily, stick close," Jake said, keeping his eyes on the encroaching shadows. She nodded, unshed tears sparkling in her eyes, but they were filled with defiance, not fear. Then, in a moment that felt almost surreal, the crowd began to chant. "Together! Together!" The power of their collective voice rose higher and higher until it ricocheted off the surrounding buildings, creating an almost physical wall against their attackers. As if spurred on by their strength, Jake stepped forward, ready to defend. It wasn't just about himself anymore, he was there for everyone. For Lily. For Mrs. Thompson. For the community that had come together like never before. Just when the crowd seemed to gain momentum, another loud crashing sound echoed through the darkness. Someone in the back had tripped, falling to the ground. The fight now felt precarious. Jake turned, eyes wide. "We can't let anyone fall behind." But was it too late? As the shadows loomed closer, threatening to engulf them, Jake felt fear creep back in. It hung in the air, thick and heavy. He couldn't let this be the end. He had to find a way to protect everyone. Would he be able to hold the line and save his community, or would they all be swallowed by the darkness? Jake's instincts kicked in as he scanned the crowd for the fallen figure. It was Timmy, the shy kid from down the block, struggling to get back on his feet, panic etched on his young face. Jake's heart sank, that vulnerability was like a crack in their wall of unity. "Lily, cover me!" he shouted, and before she could respond, he dashed back toward Timmy. The crowd behind him surged forward, shouting in solidarity. Yet the shadows were still creeping in like a wave ready to crash. "Timmy! Get up!" Jake urged. He reached down and pulled the boy to his feet with one swift motion. "You stick with me, okay? Don't look back." A flicker of fear darted through Timmy's eyes, but something else was there too, an ember of determination, igniting as he nodded. Behind them, Lily and the others formed a tighter circle, their makeshift weapons ready to defend against the approaching figures. The chant of "Together! Together!" rang out again, lifting their spirits. Jake felt a surge of hope as he linked arms with Timmy, creating a protective barrier while the crowd lifted their voices in defiance. But just as they settled into formation, the figure in black stepped forward, a dark storm cloud against the dim chaos. "You're betting on false hopes. You don't know what you're facing," he bellowed, his voice chilling. "We know you're a coward. shouted George from the front, and the crowd echoed him, "Coward! Coward!" The man's face twisted in anger, his hand raised as if to silence them. But Jake sensed it an opening. Fueled by adrenaline and the unity around him, he turned to Lily, who was moving to get closer, eyes fierce. "If we can distract them just for a moment." "Oh, I've got an idea," she said, her expression brightening as she pulled something from her pocket, a small firework, a leftover from 4th of July. "What are you thinking?" Jake asked, startled. "I can light it if we can get it close enough to them, it'll create a diversion. We just need to distract that guy in black long enough to break through." She was right. The danger might be their salvation. "Okay. We need everyone to keep them focused on us. You ready?" Lily nodded, and without waiting for a response, she darted forward. Jake felt his pulse quicken as he followed her lead. They would do this together. "Hey, over here!" Lily yelled, waving her arms as she moved to the front, drawing the attention of the figures. "You're not so tough. You're bluffing." It was a bold move, but Jake couldn't help but admire her bravery. Behind them, the crowd continued chanting, and the shadows hesitated, uncertainty creeping in. Jake's heart raced as he felt the tide of fear shift again. With one quick flick, Lily ignited the firework, and a small plume of smoke snaked into the air. It was like lighting a fuse on hope. "Now!" she shouted. Jake lunged forward with her, pushing through as the explosion erupted, lighting up their faces with dazzling colors and thunderous crackles. The shadows faltered, and in that moment, chaos reigned in favor of the defenders, but as the colors danced through the air, a figure darted from the side, eyes fixated on Lily, intent on stopping her. Jake's heart dropped. "Lily!" He sprinted toward her, but was he too late? Jake barreled through the cacophony, his lungs burning as he pushed past the startled crowd. Every beat of his heart echoed a desperate urgency. "Lily!" he shouted, panic threading through his veins as he glimpsed the shadowy figure swooping toward her. The colors of the firework exploded in brilliant reds and blues, lighting the scene in surreal bursts. For a split second, everything seemed to hang in the air, the shimmer of hope woven into the chaos. "Lily, watch out!" A blur of seconds passed like a race against time. Her eyes widened as she registered the threat, and in that fleeting moment, Jake felt time folding inward. He sprinted, powered not just by fear but by the fierce joy that enveloped him whenever he thought of the life each person in this crowd had: families, homes, laughter and love. Jake lunged forward, arms reaching, desperate to intercept the figure, to shield Lily from whatever dark fate they intended for her. But even as he closed the distance, Lily did something unexpected. She ducked and rolled, pivoting on her heels and charging back toward him, determination ignited in her young gaze. "Get down!" she shouted, and in the next moment, she tossed the firework across the ground, and it erupted again, a burst of sparks showering the air, distracting the shadow that sought to capture her. The figure hesitated, momentarily disoriented. Jake seized that fraction of a second, charging ahead and tackling the shadowy assailant to the ground with all the adrenaline fueling his fight. The dull thud echoed in the chaos, and his heart thundered in his ears, a primal beat of survival. From behind, George swung a makeshift weapon, an old shovel gathered from the garden shed, and struck another figure trying to flank them. The crowd responded, rallying tighter, courage ignited by the sight of their own unity. They were no longer just a gathering of individuals, they were an army, grounded by the indomitable spirit of community. Together! Jake roared, adrenaline pumping. The crowd responded in kind, a collective roar growing louder, more fierce. Together! Under the relentless barrage of courage, the shadows began to retreat. Dark figures exchanged anxious glances, whispering words laced with fear as the community surged forward, emboldened by their resolve. For every blow they delivered, another flicker of hope took root. Jake pulled himself back to his feet, heart steadying as he searched for Lily. He found her standing proudly, fists clenched, her determination mirroring his own. "We did it!" she said breathlessly, awe spreading across her face as she surveyed the assembly standing proud, but the figure in black, now visibly shaken, narrowed his eyes, looking ready to concoct a hasty retreat. "This isn't the end," he hissed, backing away into the darkness. "You'll regret this." The crowd didn't falter. They encroached on the retreating figures, asserting their courage, born from shared purpose. "You're wrong," Jake yelled back, chest puffed with newfound resolve. "This is just the beginning. We stand for our children, for our future." As the last echoes of their chants faded, the oppressive darkness that had loomed over Willow Creek began to recede. Eyes filled with tears of relief and determination met one another in the light of the hope they'd sparked together. It wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about the resilience of a community rising, igniting against threats, locking arms for what they believed in. Triumph surged in the air as they embraced victory and undying promise that no one would ever stand alone again. But beneath the elation was a whisper of worry. The threat still lingered in the shadows. They could regroup. Their work wasn't done. "We've got to stay vigilant," Jake said, glancing at his neighbors. "We will," Sarah reassured him, her gaze warm and fierce. "This is our home. We'll protect it." As they stood shoulder to shoulder, the chill of danger behind them morphed into an exhilarating warmth of hope. The journey wouldn't be easy, and shadows would always lurk in corners, but together, they'd be a force. Indomitable, with hearts ignited and lives woven together, they would rewrite what it meant to live in Willow Creek, revealing to all that kindness, courage, and community would always light the darkest paths. Now wasn't the time to linger, it was a time of action. Jake lifted his chin, contrasting the fear he'd felt with a growing resolve. Because they had each other, they would fight for every child deserving of a future. They had done it once, and they would do it again. In that charged atmosphere, under the fading embers of the firework, a bond forged with sweat and spirit shimmered brighter than ever before, and so they turned together, ready to face whatever awaited them, comforted by the knowledge that they'd carry the day together. You need to subscribe now to see how this journey continues. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these inspiring stories thriving. Comment below with your reactions and feelings about this electrifying ending. It matters more than you know. Don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this transformation. Together, we can spread hope far and wide.